Heads Will Roll is about a sitcom star who gets cancelled for something that she tweeted, and her life falls apart. So she goes off to a digital detox camp in order to get away from the world. But when she gets there, she discovers that it's actually a camp for other cancelled people, and somebody at camp wants to cancel them for good.
I usually don't start out talking about the actual book itself.
Mm-hmm.
No exception, and this is no fault of yours because you weren't named Josh. You just showed up, and that's the name you were given. But I realized that you're the fourth Josh or Joshua that I have talked to since the beginning of May, and so I did a 4-episode kind of epic thing with Josh Malerman, where I went to his house and spent the weekend there.
Amazing.
And then after that, I interviewed Joshua Milliken for his book Teleportasm, which is on Shortwave Publishing. And then after him, I had Joshua Chaplinsky on for his book Letters to the Purple Satin Killer. And so now, by no fault of your own, and you would have been earlier if your book came out earlier in the year. I try to time it that way, but you are Josh number 4 to join me this year. And so apologies to any other Joshes, but this is the cutoff. I can't do this anymore with Joshes. I got to get another name up in here.
My joke with Josh Mellerman is that I am other Josh, because I was on like a panel with him earlier in the year. I think it was the Library Journal panel. And he was talking about the other mummy with incidents around the house, and I was like, I think that I'm just the other Josh, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but either way, that's who I am.
That's I've only had that happen one other time, where I interviewed 3 Maxes like in the course of a month. It was like Max Brooks, Max Booth, Max Berry. So that was 3 Maxes all within like 5 weeks. But
and all with B surnames as well, just to really throw you off.
Max B's, I didn't even think about that, but so it's weird when they stack up like that. But you know what though, like being in that's good company, I think. Being other Josh to Josh Mallerman, I wouldn't mind that too much if I were you.
Yeah. I actually haven't read the book yet. I've got it sitting on my shelf. And I've read the first couple of pages, and I love the style so much. And I need to actually just sit down and give it some proper time, which at the moment I'm in edits for 2 different books, and I'm reading various other books for podcasts and stuff. So I need to get all that out of the way, and then I'm going to sit down and I'm going to read Incidents Around the House. And I can't wait to read it.
I hear you with the waiting to read stuff, because like some with advanced copies of stuff, sometimes you get stuff 10 months before it comes out. And so I've been sitting on Zoya Stage's Dear Hannah, which I'm pointing to right here, is the sequel to Baby Teeth from 2018. I got that at the beginning of the year and been dying to read the follow-up to that story. And it's just, I had other stuff to do for the podcast. So like those responsibilities that you can't escape are always pushing and I'm not a huge fast reader. I think I probably read about 35 books a year. And I think that that's something to be proud of. Whereas other people are reading, like Sadie Hartman reads like 200 books a year or something like that.
So unbelievable. Yeah. I have nothing but respect for anybody who can read more than 30, because life this and also we're living in a multimedia world where there is so much great stuff out there on various different formats. You've got DVD, you've got streaming, you've got podcasts, you've got books, you've got TV, you've got movies. There's so much demand for your time, and I'm finding it increasingly stressful to manage all the different things that I really want to consume, because there's so much great stuff. It's almost overwhelming. And actually my response kind of has been, I'm just going to watch the stuff that I know I love. And it's like low pressure. I'm just going to rewatch all my favorite films from the 80s and the 90s, because there is zero pressure there whatsoever. And that kind of doesn't really solve the problem, but it definitely works around it, kind of, I guess.
Well, no, I think that's a good approach, and comes down to like, if this is and I guess it might be different for you because you work in film journalism, right? So there is a level of like, I make a living off of this, but like to some degree, the thing that you're doing for enjoyment should remain enjoyable, so if there's too much stress, and I do the same thing. I've been meaning to go see the movie Maxine.
Yeah.
And I was like this close the other day to going, and then I was like, I got stuff I got to do, and maybe today I'll wander off and go see it. But like, yeah, I mean, for reading, one of the things that I've absolutely embraced is the fact that, especially in horror, novellas are just top notch, and they're so easy to get through. So I think that is like a saving grace for me. Like, I can whip out a quick episode where I read a novella and talk to someone way easier than 460 pages of Stephen Graham Jones. So
yeah, totally. And I, as a writer, have definitely been thinking, I kind of want to get into this novella game. That seems like something that would be a really good use of my time. And I'm not saying that they're easier to write or they're quicker to write, but definitely that sort of length suddenly looks very attractive in the world where we're constantly in demand. Our time is in demand as people.
Yeah. And the weird thing about it is, like, I don't really think you lose much when you're going to that shorter format. Like, you can still build like a level of like, we're invested in the characters. You can still steer the shit out of people. There's so much you can do, and sometimes I think because it's more concise or it's a shorter experience, the feelings might even be a little bit more. They might feel stronger because it happened quicker or something like that. Like something to that format, I think, really lends itself to horror. Yeah,
I agree. And like I read Brian McCauley's Candy Cane Kills last year.
Yeah.
And I just recently read another book in that shortwave Killer VHS series, Cicada by Tanya Pell, and they're both like perfect horror stories that are, roughly 40,000 words. I'm going to say maybe a bit more than that, but the way that they hit every mark so perfectly, without compromising on character or scares or mystery or atmosphere. The way that they nailed those books has kind of left me completely in awe, and like itching to see if I can do it at some point, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And then from the perspective of a reader, I don't get discouraged from doing something because I don't think it'll take too long to get through or whatever. So it's actually helped me keep the momentum of reading. Like, I'll just, if I read a big book, I'll throw in, 130 page something, and that keeps me going. And I feel like I get that dopamine hit of like, I accomplished something, I got to the end of something. And so I think there's something subtly psychological, or I think too much about it. It's one of the two. But I love thinking about that. I just bore the shit out of all the people in my life talking about like how I was in tears, Josh. And I know we're going to get to your book, and I'm sorry, but like, this just got me thinking about like how passionate I get. I was literally in tears the other night telling my girlfriend about an episode of the TV show Fringe because of like how beautiful the storytelling was. And that's the thing where I don't have like a proper guide rails for when it's like, this person doesn't care about what you're saying. So
just get some new friends.
Well, I can't replace the girlfriend. She's kind of
that's true. Yeah, I know what you mean though. I think that my boyfriend says this quite a lot, that there's nothing more appealing or attractive than somebody being really into something and being really passionate about something. So my big thing since I was a teenager was the TV show Charmed, which just for some reason completely obsessed, like absolutely love it to this day. Very upset that Shannon Doherty sadly died a couple of days ago. But but that show, like, I could talk to anybody about that show till the cows come home. And my boyfriend, thankfully, found that charming. So yeah, it's but obviously, yeah, it can be difficult to know when to shut up about it, maybe.
No, well, he's onto something because I do find that that's part of this is finding the thing that we can talk about where, like, you can't tell, you don't know how much you're glowing about the thing that you're saying, but the
Yeah,
other people can actually, like, can feel it. What was I going to say about that? So that's wise, and I love tapping into that thing that someone's more nerdy than anything else about, or than anyone else about, and seeing, like, because it's fascinating that you care about it that much. It's like
yeah,
that's what makes it interesting, is that it's so important to you. So yeah, there's definitely something to that. I think from our own perspectives, we don't have the awareness to think um, anybody's going to care to
yeah,
hear about it
yeah,
or something. So at least that's my thing is, I'll be like, do you know why they're wearing that color shirt in this scene? It's because the costume department is telling you that this is a characteristic of them. Like, and they're like, whatever, Rob. But yeah, it's those kinds of things that I just love. I love it when, like, people go off on their passions and stuff.
yeah, yeah.
um, so all right, I'm going to take a turn into the book really quick, and
Mm.
it has to do with the shirt I'm wearing. So
Yes.
one of the things about Heads Will Roll that I noticed very early on, that I really enjoyed, was some unsubtle references to people and things in horror. And so early on, the main character puts on her, I think, baggy J. Daniels shirt. And this is definitely not baggy, but I wore this because I actually was wearing a different shirt. And then I was going through my notes and I was like, oh shit, the shirt. So I changed into the shirt for that specific
Oh,
reason.
amazing.
But I noticed other things, like, and it got me thinking, um, reading classic horror, classic, books that came out in the 90s and 80s and stuff like that. We don't have the kind of cultural awareness of what was going on then, the way that now when I'm reading new books that just come out, Paul Tremblay's latest book is getting mentioned, or Jay Daniels, who didn't exist 4 years ago. And so there's a lot of really cool references like that. And I guess the thing that I'm for the listeners, um, the main character is kind of a horror buff, and so that's like building up what this means to her. Um, but was it just in service of your main character being a horror buff, or did you like the idea of, like, little winks to other people in the industry?
Oh, I love doing little winks. For me, like, a really formative film was Scream. And I know that Stephen Graham Jones is
Yeah.
also like a huge Scream fan, and I think that's had a huge influence on his, certainly his, more overtly slasher stories, where referencing other properties that people love, is sort of it's like in Scream, that's just part of the texture of that world. These are like hip, cool '90s kids who grew up with movies, living in a pop culture world,
Yeah.
and so their shorthand is referencing certain characters or movies that as if they're like real people, and it's
Hmm.
and I think Scream was definitely one of the first films to do that, and it did it in such a brilliantly wry and knowing way, but also in a way that was so loving.
Hmm.
You just really felt like the guy who wrote this, the characters who are living in this world, they love this stuff. That's why these films have become shorthand to them, because it's a way of expressing how they feel. Um, and so, kind of like the I guess the relay effect of that is that I love Scream, and so whenever I write now, I can't not sort of reference things just purely by nature. That's sort of just that's a style I love.
Hmm.
That's something I really enjoy in the media that I consume. So it's something that I do in my own writing. And I've done it with my previous two books as well. So I wrote a book called The Shadow Glass, which is very much inspired by 1980s fantasy puppet films like Labyrinth and The Dark Crystal.
Oh, right on. Yeah,
And I
yeah.
wrote Burn the Negative, which is inspired by so-called cursed horror films. Oh yeah, it's just behind you there on the shelf. And the thing that I noticed with writing those books, was that it hopefully gives you a sense of belonging as the reader. It hopefully gives you a sense of being among friends, being
Mhm.
within like a loving community where you're there reading a story, and you get those jokes, and you kind of feel like you're part of the story in a way,
Mhm.
because you totally identify with the stuff that these characters love so much, because you love it as well. Um, so that's a huge part of it. And also, the other thing was that with when I was writing Heads Will Roll, Stephen Graham Jones supported Burn the Negative in really lovely, quiet ways that I only became aware of sort of like after the matter. So he put Burn the Negative on a list of slasher. And I think he's got a bookshop page, and
Oh, okay.
he's got a slasher bookshop page, and he put Burn the Negative on there, which was fantastic and lovely of him. And he also listed it in various. There was a Goodreads article. There was a Capes and Tights podcast article where he just threw Burn the Negative on there, and was just like really supportive in such a lovely way. So my way of sort of saying thank you and returning that in some small way was to give a little nod to Jay Daniels in my book. Also loving Jay Daniels as well, obviously.
Of
And
course.
the same with Paul Tremblay. Paul Tremblay is mentioned in Heads Will Roll as well, because he
Mhm.
blurbed Burn the Negative very kindly. And yeah, it's just been like a really supportive person in this industry. So there's that as well.
Mhm. One of the things about that stuff you just said that I think is great is that, at least for me, or the people who are fans of, let's say, horror and have read the J. Daniel stuff and Paul and everything like that. And you kind of said this, but it's the thing that really stands out to me is like, yeah, it is almost like a shortcut for empathy in a way. Like, it makes you, with just saying I put on my J. Daniel shirt, I can just be like, all right, I know what's going on with this character, um, which is great because um, you're just kind of fast tracking the I'm on this person's side. I get them. I know where they're coming from, kind of thing. But I've also seen on social media and stuff, some of the people who have like early read that, I knew the Jay Daniels thing was in there because someone was like freaking out and posting it on social media. So like,
Yeah.
that's kind of cool too. Like, it's a fun thing for the fans. It has a practical use in the actual like telling of the story for the people who are familiar with that stuff. But then, yeah, you also get to say thanks to the people in the community. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot going on there that's really all very positive and good. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, sorry, you did ask about why I made the character a horror fan as well, and I think that I was very aware that with Burn the Negative, I'd written a main character who is kind of really against horror.
Mm,
She's quite a you understand why. She's like the so-called survivor of a cursed horror film, so she's
mhm.
pushed horror away as much as possible because it's ruined her life. So with Heads Will Roll, I kind of wanted to remedy that slightly, and have a main character who loved horror movies, but has become trapped in the world of sitcoms. She's trapped living in a genre that she doesn't want to be in, and she
Mhm.
lives for horror, and she's been stuck in this bloody sitcom world where it's affected everything to do with like her relationships, her career, her idea of herself, her self image.
Yeah.
And so I quite liked the idea of somebody coming into their own through their love for horror, and that kind of being a good thing.
Yeah, there is a whole lot of dealing with identity and who you feel like you can publicly be that goes on in this book, and but in more than one way, because there's a sexual orientation kind of thing going on, like hiding the fact that you're, well, I guess, I don't know how much I'm supposed to say about this. Like, I always tell everybody that I'm talking to that I care about spoilers as much as you do.
I think no,
but
it's cool to. I'm cool with talking about the sexuality stuff.
yeah, well, because
It's
like
pretty early on.
as yeah, that's true. And as you mentioned, like, so our main character is a like a TV star kind of person, a young early 20s TV star, and in a particularly, like, in a very particular type of show that's very let's just say, like, I'm like heteronormative, or like your
Yeah.
all American girl kind of thing, like. And so being anything outside of that feels weird to the fans, feels like this isn't who you're supposed to be. So, like, she's dealing with that kind of stuff. Um, and so there's that, because, like, she's bi. I guess I
Hmm.
could say that, right? She's bi.
Yeah.
And but can't publicly be that way while she's on this TV show. So there's that part of her identity, but also, like, she has to be that all American thing. She can't walk around in the J. Daniels shirt, because it isn't the persona that's been built. And the impression I got, and you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, was like it's the persona they want her to kind of be, instead of what she would just naturally be on her own, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's sort of like a weird safety blanket. It's a survival mechanism. You kind of learn about her backstory, and it's tied up in losing her parents and looking for a sense of security. And her parents happened to work in Hollywood in Los Angeles, and so she gravitates back towards that part of the world, seeking um, sort of the security that she has lacked. And she, I guess, because she maybe looks a certain way, she gets typecast. She gets branded as
Yeah.
this shiny sitcom kind of Zoe Deschanel kind of style person, and she kind of wears that for a while, but it starts to sort of calcify around her, and she's desperate to escape it because this thing that has kept her alive is actually now kind of killing her.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, so she ends up getting cancelled because of something that she tweeted. And there's this question of, did she kind of do it on purpose? Was this a way out of this identity?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's lots of stuff going on about sort of discovering who you are and how you survive in a world when horrible things are going on.
Yeah. I mean, timely.
Yeah.
I just feel like I'm just being crushed by. I can't even scroll. Like, I'm not going to get into political stuff or anything, but I try to stay as optimistic as possible, and I can't even just lazily scroll through social media now, because I'm just going to
Yeah.
get hit with something that just tears my heart apart. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's a timely kind of thing to be exploring, I'd say.
Yeah.
The setup, I want to go to a little bit of the story mechanic of it, because, um, and I guess I wrote it down in this way, so I'll just ask it in this way. What came first, the camp or the canceled celebrity? Like, you know what I'm saying? Because two of the big elements of the story are, there's a camp that people go to kind of get away from their scandals and stuff, and just kind of unplug and remove themselves from the world for a little while, and kind of recover. But there's also, someone being a canceled celebrity. So I feel like either one of those things could have been like the kernel that this grew from. Or I could be wrong,
Yeah.
and they came at the same time. So curious how that got going.
I would love to give you a definitive answer. I think I knew I was doing a camp. I knew that I was doing a camp slasher story. But I think originally it was just a regular camp.
Mhm.
My editor kind of floated the idea of me possibly doing a conversion therapy camp. But I co-wrote a self-published book in 2014 called Camp Carnage, that was set in the 1980s conversion camp, and it was a slasher novel. So I was like, well, I can't really do that because I feel like I've kind of explored that to the
Mm-hmm.
fullest that I can. So I don't really want to do that. So what other kind of camps are there? And also I was kind of thinking, what scares me? Like what really actually scares me at the moment? And the thing that was scary late 2022, when I was just really sort of starting to plot this out, was social media. It just started to feel like hellfire. It was like
Yeah.
it felt like you couldn't put a single toe wrong because somebody's going to come out and cut that toe off for you. And I personally haven't really been affected by it, but I've seen other people tweeting, perfectly innocuous things, and somebody desperately forcing an agenda onto what they've tweeted
Yeah.
and twisting it and wrenching it out of all context until it resembles something horrific. And that to me is scary. And it ties into things like reputation. People have been chased offline. People have had their reputations destroyed by other people's perception of who they are. It's not just what they tweeted. It's who are you really? You're a monster, and we found you out. Kind of that's the thinking around it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as soon as I started thinking about what would it actually be like to be that cancelled person, and I'm not talking about sort of people that have ended up going to court for actual illegal activity. I'm talking about for the most part, regular people who have maybe said things that aren't particularly clever, and they've been ruined online for it.
Right.
And so once I started thinking about that, it kind of started to become, well, you'd want to get the hell away from all technology. And that's when the digital detox camp came into it, I think.
Yeah.
But it's always just like it's flying monkeys in my brain. It's, just whenever I'm plotting something, it just really is whatever comes out. There's no real rhyme or reason.
Well, so the reason I ask that, and this is my brain when I'm reading something, I'm the type of person who establishes rules. So I'm looking for rules in a story
Mm.
when I'm reading, and that's why it's really good to read Stephen Graham Jones, because that guy definitely has worked rules into the way his stories work. And so I'm reading I'm reading the beginning of the book, and I know it's a camp in a horror story, and so I'm thinking about the things that need to happen in order to isolate. Like one of
Mm.
the things about horror is you're trapped, and so and then like some of how the camp works, it comes up right away, and it's like, oh, no technology. They lock your phone in a thing and lock the key in a safe or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, he just took care of that problem. Like like
Yeah.
right away, just like there's no, like that's the first door shut behind you, like and so I was like, this is going to be great. It was like, for me, that worked so well as part of the story because it's completely legitimate. It doesn't seem like it was contrived for the sake of the story. But it overcame an early obstacle in a way that I was like, I'm going to like this. I'm really going to enjoy this. So
Oh, cool. Well, it's kind of my editor at Putnam. I had Mark Twain, not Mark Twain, Mark Tavani was my original editor, but he left. And I had my new editor, Aranya Jane, and they both kind of really wanted me to um, tap into the wish fulfillment aspect of this scenario as well. So that was a real challenge at the beginning for the first maybe 100 pages of the book, having an undercurrent of tension within a scenario that actually a lot of people might quite enjoy. Giving up your phone,
yeah.
being in this beautiful, idyllic middle of nowhere by a lake. You get to like sing campfire songs and do all these fun activities. Like do yoga every day and eat cleanly, and there's no alcohol, and like that would be quite nice, I think, for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So the challenge there was like to pay paid sort of service to that while also being like, no, this is a horror novel. So sort of just throwing in little things that seemed a little bit off,
Mm-hmm.
and ramping up to horror in the way that a slasher movie would. You know, you watch Friday the 13th, the first one especially, and it's sort of like happy, happy, happy. Oh, there's someone dead, but happy, happy, happy. You know, it really does it has to earn those shocking, gory moments that come in the third act.
Uh-huh. Well, one of the, I think, effective, so like you introduce those, like, something's not right in this perfect situation, like in several ways. There's like the getting the door knocked on but no one's
Mhm.
there, like classic kind of deal. um, but the untimely demise of an iPod was a very tense moment in like the beginning of the book, because like you can't have any technology, and so an iPod gets found, and and murdered with an axe very
Yeah.
publicly in front of the whole camp. And that created a weird tension where it's a rule that was broken, but the way that the rule was, why the punishment was very over the top, but it created tension in a really kind of chill
Mm.
situation. So and I love that iPod's death still served the story later on too, in ways that I'm not going to talk about. But yeah, like, yeah, so there was those little moments of someone knocked on my door, no one's there. Someone went nuts and like axed an iPod to death. Like, it did create those, like, things are off a little bit in this like kind of perfect
Mm.
situation, which was cool. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it.
And I'm the nerd that will find all that stuff.
Yeah.
One of the things, this is probably going to be a tangent, but it's more of a curiosity, because we were talking about you making references to things, and one of the campers, Buck, early in the story, talking about like restoring a motorcycle, and he says that he's gonna explore the country or explore the world Dennis Hopper style, was the way that it was put. And I stopped. I was reading. My girlfriend was in the room, and we talked about this. And I was like, they just said Dennis Hopper style. And so in my mind, I was like, this is a reference to the movie Easy Rider.
Yes.
And I'm right about that. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Um, and she's like, okay, yeah. And I was like, don't you know how that movie ended? And she's like, what? She couldn't think of anything specifically wrong. And so we discovered that she had watched an edited version for American television that cut out like a good chunk of the end of that movie, and I had seen the movie in its full form. And so when I said that to her, she's like, "Oh, okay, so like hippies riding around on motorcycles," and I
Yeah.
was like, "They got murdered by rednecks."
Yeah.
And so my curiosity was, did you put that in knowing the full cut of the film, or did you put that in knowing kind of the edited cut of the film?
Oh
What?
wow! Oh, that's a very intelligent. I think you're making me seem more intelligent than I am. I think I put it in there purely because that movie is so iconic as a motorbike film, and
Sure, sure.
it felt like the kind of film that somebody like Buck would um, love and sort of like hold up as this lifestyle of choice. Um, but yeah, I think maybe I hadn't really quite thought through how it did end, and how that could be actually construed as something a bit darker. But maybe it kind of works anyway. I don't know. Like, I
Well,
like
it
the idea that
does.
maybe he didn't see the end of the movie, like, or maybe he saw the edited version of the movie. He just
Yeah.
was like getting high, getting stoned, watching Easy Rider, loving it, thinking it was the best film ever, and he always passed out before he got to the end.
Well, and that's the thing. It works really well because A, that could be the situation. B, Buck can just be remembering the part that inspired him or connected with,
Yeah,
which was like the freewheeling out there doing your thing, on your own terms kind of thing. But it really works as like a, because those guys didn't know that was coming. So like for anybody who's listening who hasn't seen the full Easy Rider, so like they, the whole movie happens, but at the very end, they're leaving where they were. They're going somewhere else, and they pass some, rednecks in a truck. And the rednecks in the truck, because I read up on this afterwards, because I was like, am I wrong about this? Say, I'm going to scare these guys and shoot a shotgun out the window, but hit one of the guys. So the other guy, takes his motorcycle back to like check in on the friend, and then the truck turns around, and kind of the final scene is you hear a gunshot and then just an empty motorcycle kind of crashing, and it's really tragic and dark at the end. But I could see it fitting in this, and that's why I wanted to ask about it, was I could see it fitting in the story as like Buck just has this idea of this like fun adventure thing, but in a way where he doesn't see what's coming the way that they didn't see what was coming. So it was like almost like a harbinger of, be careful what you wish for. So I was so fascinated because like it's so crazy that we had two different experiences of watching that movie where I in my mind I was like, this could go either way. So
yeah. But also maybe it kind of works as like you're not supposed to really trust anybody in the camp. There's like there are lots of question marks hanging over everybody's heads in that camp. Nobody is using their real name. Willow, the main character Willow, that isn't her name. Right. You spend the whole book not knowing what her name is. And so, maybe if somebody actually in the group had seen Easy Rider, they probably would have called him on it, or at least questioned. Like, really? Do you want to go around shooting and, that kind of thing? So, yeah.
Yeah. It's obvious I wasn't at the camp, I guess, is.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you would have solved it like that.
But no, that was just such a. But that goes back to me really overanalyzing stuff sometimes. Where
no, that's great. No, I love that. That's the reason to put this stuff in there. Like you put these Easter eggs in for readers who want to or are able to sort of like excavate them and really go, okay, interesting. Like, why has that been chosen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like how does this fit? Like, why was that the example? That's kind of where my mind goes. But like, I acknowledged as I was digging into it in my brain, everyone else is going to blow past this reference and just keep going because it's not a particularly like it wasn't said in a way where it was like the focus of a scene or something. It's just a thing a guy said. So, but I decided to blow that up into like, something way bigger.
It's great. Dream reader.
It makes for good conversation.
Yeah.
I hope at least. Another thing that served the story well, especially in the beginning with the tension stuff, was there's a bit of an urban legend that's tied to the camp. Knock Knock Nancy, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
And so it's a camp. They're around the campfire telling stories, and one of the campers tells the story of, and I guess I can acknowledge that these are all adults. Like it's not like teen campers or anything like that, but like tells a story of this urban legend that's supposedly in the area. Like, back in the 1800s, there was a priest who, whatever, goes into this whole urban legend about this person who lost her head and now goes around looking for her head kind of and taking other people's heads because she can't find her own kind of thing. So that urban legend, first of all, it suits a camp story. So like at a base level, it belongs there. But again, where you have this kind of idyllic situation, having that urban legend makes you think about like your safety. Like whenever you hear a scary story, you immediately apply it to yourself. I was talking to Josh Mellerman, and it was the whole like Jaws thing, where like when I saw Jaws as a kid, when I went into a swimming pool, I was convinced there was a shark in there, which is ridiculous and stupid, but it's just, it gets into your head. And so I think that that absolutely was like a necessary big part of the story. I guess my question is like, what's your take on urban legends? Are you a fan? I've got to imagine you're a fan of them. But like, I just wanted to open up the idea of urban legends for you to talk about what you think about them.
I do love an urban legend. I love the way that they are, for all intents and purposes, they're fiction, but they're masquerading as fact. I
Mhm.
find that a really fascinating sort of conundrum or enigma, I guess. And I like the idea that there's a root in truth somewhere potentially.
Yeah.
And so, what is that root, and how has this particular story grown out of that? How many? It's like campfire tales. How many times has this story been told over and over? And every time it's told, it might change. It's been embellished, and until it's become something wildly different to the original event. Um, and so, with the Knock Knock Nancy story, I kind of wanted to acknowledge Sleepy Hollow because we're in upstate New York. Uh, there's an axe murderer on the loose, heads being taken away. I was like, I have to acknowledge Sleepy Hollow, but I wanted to play on that myth as well because I felt like when I stumbled across this idea of heads being removed, that to me tapped into the theme of identity in the book and
Mm.
loss of identity. Um, having a part of you literally removed, and in like a violent, horrific way, and how that's like one of the worst things that could ever happen to you is to have your identity stripped away from you. So that was like the thematic undercurrent to the myth. Um, and so then the story kind of evolves over the course of the book, and you do find out why this story exists, and hopefully it's a satisfying sort of reveal that does tie into the story of our main character and her plight.
And definitely leads to some of the more disturbing imagery. So, what I haven't acknowledged yet is that like we're in a horror book, and like people die throughout and stuff like that. And there's some some stuff at the end of the book with the like what happens with some people who have been killed that is just the creepiest thing. And I think that being in an unfamiliar kind of upstate New York wooded area, like and maybe stumbling across or not seeing something unexpected somewhere, just amplifies the creep factor. But there's some twisted stuff you put in the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. There was some stuff that I was like, is this going too far? I'm not sure I'm allowed to do this. Um, but it felt right. It felt like it fitted. It didn't feel exploitative. It didn't feel sort of left field in a way that didn't fit the story. It felt perfectly in keeping with the story that was being told. So
Mhm.
it
Yeah,
stayed. Yeah.
I'll agree with that. One thing that occurred to me, so you live in England,
Yeah.
and this takes place in upstate New York. Um, do you have any personal experience in the area, or I, and then maybe as a follow up, like what was the thought behind setting it there?
I've watched at least 12 Friday the 13th movies.
Oh, I love it.
I have been up that way. I've been to Beacon. Um, I've been to Connecticut. I actually, um, not to be like grossly name droppy or anything, but I actually once visited the house of Lorraine Warren, the paranormal investigator in Connecticut. So I've been up that
Oh,
kind of
nice.
part of the world. So I totally have a first-hand experience of being there, and going hiking around Beacon was just unbelievably beautiful. But also, if it hadn't been sunshine and smiles, it would have been absolutely horrifying. I would not
Hmm.
want to be out in the woods when the sun went down. So yeah,
Yeah.
I have experienced that part of America. But yeah, I guess writing Americans, I was nervous about that. But I kind of got around it with Burn the Negative. The main character, she was born in America, but then she, from a very young age, was raised in England. So I felt like I had a bit of wiggle room there that I could, if I messed anything up, I would be
Mm-hmm.
okay. But then with Heads Will Roll, they're pretty much like it's a fully American cast. And I did start getting slightly in my head about, would they really say that? Is that how an American would respond to this? Um, and I'm very aware of amazing American authors like Grady Hendrix, whose sort of cultural touch points are so specific and so beautifully on point. I could never ever do that. I could never replicate that. It would just be impossible. That's lived experience, and I couldn't ever do that.
Mm.
So I just tried to be as authentic to the characters, just as human beings as I could, and
Mm-hmm.
then hoped that I could make them convincingly American.
Well, mission accomplished. I will say
Ah,
that there wasn't a moment where I was like, "Oh, that's where the British is coming through" or whatever.
mm,
Like, so I feel like, and maybe that's a credit to the approach of keeping the characters very authentic. I'm not
yeah, and
sure,
I,
but
I
yeah,
have
like,
to say, I did get help from the proofreaders and the editors, and there were a couple of Britishisms that did slip in, and it was really specific stuff. Like, uh, I kept saying things like, I've not been there before, or I've not done so and so. And that apparently is a Britishism,
yeah,
whereas an American would say, I haven't,
yep.
which I hadn't realized I was doing. But some very eagle eyed copy editors spotted those, and very grateful for them. So, yeah, I definitely had help.
Yeah. Which now that example, it seems so odd because it's the same words but different
Right.
contractions of words. It's the exact same thing but contracted differently, so
Yeah.
that it's an
Which
entirely
changes,
different sounding.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
completely
bizarre.
changes it.
But
Yeah.
it's stuff that you'd never, yeah, think about. Yeah, yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
Oh, I also, quite a late draft, had dungarees, I think. One of the
Hmm.
characters dresses up in dungarees, and that really confused my copy editor in America. She kind of said, well, what do you mean? What's dungarees? And you call them overalls, I think, or coveralls,
Uh-huh.
or
Yeah.
but
Uh-huh.
we overalls for us are like not that at all. I can't really explain what they are, but they're not dungarees.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And now that I'm thinking of it, the only American reference to dungarees I can think of is probably like from a Led Zeppelin song from the '70s or something like that.
Ah,
But otherwise, yeah, yeah. Overalls, I
yeah.
think is what. Yeah. Now I'm thinking of the movie X,
Oh
because
yeah,
she iconically is wearing the
yeah.
overalls in that, the dungarees in
The
that.
dungarees. Yeah.
I just rewatched that recently in preparation for going to see Maxine, and
Oh,
holy crap, man, Ty West
yeah.
can do
I
some
know.
stuff.
He's great. I've loved his stuff. I loved House of the Devil. That film blew me away. Um, yeah, he's just great. I think he's. Oh, and The Innkeepers. The Innkeepers is brilliant. Love that film.
Yeah, I'll have
Yeah,
to.
he's great.
I have to catch up on my Ty West.
Oh,
I'm new to the phenomenon, but
yeah.
yeah. Oh man.
The way that
Um,
he's able to do, he's clearly like a style stickler, like a stickler for style. Like he's able to be very specific in the way that he captures an era, not just like the era as we imagine it, but the era of film as it was shot and as it was filmed.
mhm.
So yeah, but he also is able to tell a great story. So he's kind of got style and substance, which is the golden twosome.
Well, not to go off on a whole Ty West um, tangent,
Mm.
but the movie Pearl. So you watch X and you're like, okay, I'm down for this. I want to see the origin of this crazy old lady. And you watch Pearl, and Mia Goth just in that. So there was that kind of monologue kind of closer to the end where she's talking to the sister-in-law or whatever. And that was like a real holy shit thing. And then that smile that she held at the very end of the movie was just the creepiest, most unsettling thing. So she deserves some credit. She acted her ass off, I think, in those.
Oh yeah, she's great. She's phenomenal. Yeah, if they ever made a Shelley Duvall biopic, I think Mia Goth would absolutely kill it.
Yeah.
Who,
may she rest in peace.
Yes.
Recently, Shelley Duvall. Yeah. We have just been devastated. Like, we lost Richard Simmons and Dr. Ruth, I think, in the same day.
Wow.
And then, losing
Donald Sutherland.
Donald Sutherland.
Yeah.
Which made me want to go back and watch the movie Backdraft.
Yeah.
Of all things.
Yeah. Okay.
That's weird. So, all right. Talking about, Burn the Negative is the kind of classic haunted film kind of idea of a story, which I kind of want to make like book playlists of like books that touch these topics, because Paul Tremblay's book recently, was it The Night Film? Marisha Pessel does that kind of thing. Anyway. And now, so Heads Will Roll definitely lives in that like camp slasher story style. Do you feel like you want to explore or kind of do your own take on these different types of things, like or is it just these are the stories that popped into your head and these are the ones that you're going to tell, like, or do you like, are you scratching an itch when you do these, or is it just like this is the inspiration and so this is what I'm writing?
That's a really good question. I've been kind of struggling to think about what a third book in this kind of sequence might be. Like, what's the next thing that I love that I would want to do my own spin on? But yeah, so like Cursed Films, what was the gem of, I think the gem of the idea with that one really was meeting Lorraine Warren and being like, I want to write a story about a psychic, a paranormal investigator. And then with Heads Will Roll, that was like, I just love summer camp stories and I would love to try to do like a fresh take on that kind of story. But yeah, I don't have like a checklist. I know that there are authors who kind of, that they are ticking certain, that they do a werewolf book and then they do a vampire book and like a ghost book, and that's fantastic. And I love all of those authors, but I'm not, that's not my approach. I don't think. It really does have to be, I think I have weirdly just become somebody who's interested in analyzing popular culture and how it sort of informs our lives and how it informs horror, I guess. And it was never really a conscious idea to do that. I think maybe because I do have a background in film journalism. But even before being a film journalist, I can see on my shelf right now, I've got a couple of scrapbooks that I was making as a teenager where I was buying magazines, cutting out the stuff that I loved, like reviews of The Faculty and like interviews with Jennifer Love Hewitt, a whole season reviews of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and like sticking them in these books and creating these little archives, I guess. And I think I'm probably just doing the same thing now, but with storytelling instead.
Yeah. No, I like that the center of it is exploring pop culture. And I feel like, so the example that comes to mind is, so I'm going to say this in a easy way, but I don't mean anything negative by it. Like there's kind of, it seems like almost like trope tourism where it's like, I'll do this, then I'll do this, then I'll do this.
Right.
And Steve Graham Jones, before he really focused in on slashers, he did the werewolves. He wrote a book called Not for Nothing, which is absolutely a detective story. And he's like, I just wanted to write my detective story. And so like, I feel like for him at some point, I feel like for Steven, he stopped lying to himself that slashers were the thing he wanted to, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
He got to the point in his self-discovery where it kept coming back to slashers, and then he just like gave over to it in a way. That's kind of my impression of, because he did jump around zombie stories and, you know, all but like there was always slashers kind of threaded throughout his experience. And so I think for him it all comes back to slashers, the whole like
Mm,
revenge kind of deal.
yeah.
So yeah, I again, me overthinking things is like, what is the thing that pushes you? And like, so far for you, it sounds like it's examining pop culture. And if there's anything to be said about that, is like, where is there more horror than in us interacting with each other? So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's kind of cool.
Yeah. I think that definitely for me, I've got a sense that I would like to be able to tell stories that sort of have the representation that I didn't ever really have as a teenager. Growing up as a gay kid in Suffolk in England, I wasn't really seeing anybody like me anywhere. Definitely not really. On TV, I had maybe Jack in Dawson's Creek, but his storyline was always very sort of dramatic, and obviously everything in Dawson's Creek was dramatic. But I'm very aware of like wanting to, and hopefully it doesn't sound like prosaic or anything, but kind of wanting to tell the stories I didn't really get to have when I was a teenager. And I'm not necessarily writing for teenagers, but very aware of having representation that matters in books.
Mhm. Yeah.
With the Shadow Glass, I wanted the heroes to be fan kids. They are the reason that they overcome the evil in the book is because they love this cult curio movie that everybody else just sort of dismisses. But the fact that they know so much about it helps them to sort of win the day.
Hmm.
And then with Heads Will Roll, having the main character be bisexual was hugely important to me, and it was kind of it was a little bit of like a little bit of a test. I was kind of testing Putnam to see what they would actually go for, because when they signed me for Burn the Negative, obviously I was like gobsmacked and very grateful, and it was fantastic. But I wasn't convinced they were going to market it as a horror book. I just had this because they didn't really have any
Yeah.
horror in their roster, so I was like, I'm going to be surprised if they do actually market this as horror, and they did. So that was fantastic. So then with Heads Will Roll, I was like, I wonder if they'll let me do a queer empowerment story in a horror book, and they were totally up for it. So there was a little bit of like pushing to see what I was allowed to get away with, and it turns out you can pretty much kind of do what you want, really, which is quite nice. They want to enable you to tell the stories you want to tell, so that's
Uh-huh.
fantastic.
I mean, that's great to hear. I think that probably there are plenty of stories that we just never got to see because they didn't find the right person to support them or believe in them.
Yeah, totally.
Um, and I feel like, at least in horror, there is more representation. And the thing that I've seen bubbling to the surface more in the last, like, I want to say six or so years, probably longer, is underrepresented people and their
Mhm.
stories. And the thing that occurs to me is like, a lot of people write or read horror to process a thing that is horrible in their lives. And people who are marginalized probably have way more experiences with stuff that, you know, was horrible in their lives. Um, and those are the stories that wouldn't get accepted for the
Mhm.
longest time. And I feel like that door is opening a little bit, for the marginalized people, the people who, the not white,
Yeah,
straight men kind of thing,
completely.
um, which is heartening. But it also shows you how, like, the vast potential of having, stories from all of these other kind of traditionally marginalized groups of people. It's like, why didn't we just have this all along? Is kind of like,
Yeah.
because it's so much more interesting than like, apologies. And I'm not going to say a name, but like some of the, like when it was like the four dudes in the 80s, like
Yeah.
I feel like there was, it's a different, like in my mind, it's like a big, beautiful garden right now where it was
Yeah,
like
completely.
a suburban lawn before. So
Yeah.
I guess that was my really fumbly way of saying like, yes, like these stories have existed all along. Finally, we get to see them, and finally, we get to benefit from them.
Yeah. Yeah, we've gotten it like I would say an embarrassment of riches, but there's nothing embarrassing about it because we do have so many different types of stories. There's horror for everyone. Yeah, I just think it's a great time to be a horror fan. It
Mm-hmm.
really is. And you can, everything for me goes back to Scream, but you can see it in Scream as well. You know, the first Scream was an all white cast. Like, sure, it had some great, strong female characters, like Gail Weathers is such a fascinating, complex human being.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you come all the way up to modern day Scream, you've got people of color, you've got gay representation.
Yeah.
It's great to see that there really is a through line where things are opening up
Mm-hmm.
for everybody, really.
Yeah.
You know.
As I was trying to express the thing I was saying, I was like, is this I could say it wrong, and that's my cancel moment. I'm going to have
Exactly.
to go to camp and get my head cut off.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
in my enthusiasm for what I'm seeing, do I say the wrong thing, and then that's it. That's over for me.
I would love to be one of those people who just does not give a shit about what they say. Wouldn't it be so
Yeah.
nice to just say what you like and not worry what anyone's going to say or think or do? That'd be great.
Well, so I
Or would
have
it be
thought
awful?
about that. I've been thinking about that because I think that you can, as long as like you're not like a bigot or like like if you're feeling evil things, then you feel like I can't say what I want because you're fucking evil. But like if you're just a normal good person, what's holding you back? So
Yeah. I do think
uh,
that if you're the kind of person who's worrying about saying the wrong thing or upsetting somebody, then you're probably not the problem. The other guys are.
right, exactly, yeah, totally. But to your point, and kind of, I think what the spirit of what you were saying was, um, I'll have like an offhanded joke I think of that's definitely not appropriate, but so the example I'll think of is like my father passed away like 20 years ago. And when you're going through like the loss of someone, it just, things pop into your head that are like awful, but like
Mm,
I need to have this kind of levity to get me through something. And so, yeah, there is a level of, you got to kind of be careful of where and when you say, you say something
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah.
um, Turning away from that really, because I just want to talk about something that I often forget to talk about, the book covers. So, um, really, when I'm, oh, sorry about the thumbs up. That's an Apple thing. Um, I know I could probably turn that feature off, but I just
Book
forget when I'm not
covers.
actively like recording. Um, it goes nuts too. Like if I do two thumbs up, I think something different happens. So yeah, see, there's like fireworks and stuff. The modern technology.
Yeah.
Um, Book covers. Like when I'm trying to figure out what I'd like to maybe read for podcasting, I look at Emily Hughes' list, that
Yeah.
readjumpscares.com,
Yeah.
of what's coming up in horror, or I look at authors that I'm aware of posting like their publishers marketplace announcements and stuff like that. But I can't tell you how compelling seeing a cool cover is to like digging into my memory so I remember it later. So
Mm,
um, when I saw the cover for the American cover for Heads Will Roll, it's a really cool, and it's for anybody who's watching on YouTube, you see it right now. It's a really cool, striking cover that like it kind of like promises the general idea of what you can expect in the book. But I only recently saw the UK cover,
mm,
which I think is way more beautiful and interesting. So
Oh, cool.
first of all, congrats on having good covers. But
Thanks.
how does that stuff play out for you? Like, what's your involvement in that kind of thing?
Sort of. Uh, I'm trying to remember. Like, I would say minimal. I'm trying to be honest. Minimal involvement, maybe. Like there are certain generally. So when I did my first two books, when I did Shadow Glass and Burn the Negative, I was very enthusiastic, and I put together PDF documents for my editor that sort of included covers I loved, covers that might give a certain feeling,
Hmm.
posters, movie posters, things that would sort of like suggest how we might do the cover. And then the designer does their thing, and they do like fantastic, amazing work that is completely not. It's like unexpected. You know, they always do something really surprising. So with Heads Will Roll, I didn't really do any PDFs. I kind of stopped doing that because I just felt like I could trust them at this point to deliver. You know, let people do what they do well, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, with Heads Will Roll, we did my one note for that cover was to change the title font because the font that was originally on there was quite conservative. It was just basically sort of like an Arial style
Okay.
font, very very basic. It had like a sparse beauty to it, but for me, if I saw that, I wouldn't necessarily get the sense of fun, and so that was the one time that I did say, can we not get something a bit more hand drawn or sort of freer, looser? And that's when they came back with the cover that we have now, and I think it's brilliant.
It's
Um,
great.
I think it really works as a physical book. I think when I first got emailed that cover, I was very surprised by the amount of empty space on the cover. Like right in
Mm-hmm.
the middle of the cover is just a big empty black space, and that kind of threw me at first. And I was a bit like, "That's is that going to work? That's a bit strange." But I actually think it's really quite funny and quite clever to have that much dark space on a cover that is set in the middle of nowhere in a summer camp
Yeah.
because it helps the imagination. I think,
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah. Um, but the UK cover, uh, that kind of went back and forth. The thing that went back and forth with that cover was the throat slit.
Right.
The original art that was sent to me was the throat slit art, and my first reaction was, "Are we allowed to do that?" You know, think of the children, kind of nonsense. Um, and the reason that it stayed was because Waterstones, which is our big bookshop chain over here, like you guys have Barnes and Noble and we have Waterstones, they were really pushing for the Goria cover, and so
Okay.
that's why we ended up with the cover that we have now. And I know that Grady Hendrix's books were a big influence on the designer. The amazing marketing person Georgie, she loves the My Best Friend's Exorcism cover, that kind of
Oh yeah.
VHS, the scuzzy VHS cover. Oh, you have
You
it on your
can't see
shelf
it,
right
but
now. Yeah.
it's like right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think she briefed the designer to sort of go for that kind of grungy feel.
Mm.
Um, but I also think that, I don't know if this is the same in the US, but in the UK, graphic novels are like huge right now. Um, they've always been sort of big, but they've absolutely exploded and kind of gone mainstream in a way over here.
Hmm.
So I wonder if that's another reason for that particular style, because they wanted to try sort of
Uh,
draw in the graphic novel crowd. I don't know for sure, but it's a theory.
if it works,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I think that the big thing for young people in the United States right now is manga. Like that
Mm.
is,
Oh, that's huge here as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Not as much the graphic novels, I don't think, but yeah, manga
Mm.
is just um, out of control, which is good. Like
Yeah.
I've always, I feel like probably when I was younger, I had a snobby phase where it was like, oh, you're not reading real stuff. Now, if you are reading, if you're taking time to look at things on a page, and it makes you feel happy, I'm mission accomplished. So like I'm everybody read the thing you want. Like I saw, what did I see? I saw like on Instagram or something, a thing where it was Barnes and Noble, the end of an aisle, and it was a bunch of kind of like monster erotica, like romance kind of books or something like that. And someone was joking about it, and I was like, people care enough about that they made an entire display for it. Yeah. So there's people who enjoy it. Yeah. Let them enjoy it. Just let them enjoy it. So
let people love what they love.
Yeah, exactly.
Completely.
A couple of things that came up. First of all, since we're talking about the kind of like the base of the story is a camp slasher kind of thing, are there any books or movies that immediately come to mind as camp slashers that you really enjoy or would recommend? And before I let you answer, I'm going to grab one that I absolutely love. Hang on a second.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I want to see what it is.
I'll hold it up in a second. It's actually like it's come out in 2 iterations over the years. Have you ever heard of an author named Joey Cabot?
No.
This is kind of this is like a deep cut. But he's most famous for doing these like 3-tile web comics where it's like photos of stuff and he'll just put like goofy shit underneath it. So he kind of came to popularity in the webcomic thing. Back in 2010, he came out with a book called Bible Camp Bloodbath.
Oh, cool.
And it's a kid who, his mom is a makeup artist for horror films. And it's just her and her kid. And this kid gets sent to a Bible camp, basically because he's got no friends and like, just to meet people and stuff like that. And it just goes fucking crazy like right away. And it is gory as hell. So it originally came out as Bible Camp Bloodbath back in 2010, but then re-released 2013 as The Summer Has Ended and We Are Not Yet Saved. So he basically took that small story and blew it up into a bigger, he really built up a lot of like the relationship with the mom and stuff.
So he kind of rewrote it.
He kind of like he grew it out a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're easy to find, but like it's quick and just hilarious. So it's not scary. It's basically like gratuitous murder in a funny way. So he takes a whole different take on it, but it just lives in my mind because there's at one point like the killer is trying to convince the main character kid that he's the one that killed everybody, but like by using like fake voices and stuff, it's just really it's really weird. But like it's obvious that he's like, how fucking crazy can I just make a camp slasher story? And so that it just that lives in my heart. So
cool. I hadn't heard of that, so that's going on the list.
Yeah, he's a Canadian author. He's written a handful of other things. But that one definitely. Bible Camp Bloodbath is the original, and then The Summer Has Ended, We're Not Yet Saved is the kind of expanded kind of rewriting of it. But that being said, what kind of camp slasher stuff? Because you've mentioned like Friday the 13th series and stuff like that, obviously.
Yeah.
But what other things come to mind that really you love or that you think people should discover?
One of my favorites is Final Girls, which is a 2015 movie. And it stars Tessa Farmiga. She's like the younger Farmiga. And she's like the daughter of an actor who was the final girl in a slasher film. And she gets pulled into the film with her friends and they have to act out the movie. And it's sort of like she's coming to terms with the death of her mother through the movie, through acting out the movie. Her mum is obviously in the movie, so she's there with her mum as a character in the film. It's like really self-knowing. It's very funny. It's surprisingly moving. It's got a great use of the song Betty Davis Eyes, which is one of my absolute favorite songs ever. And it's got like a genuinely epic final battle set a bit amid like lightning strikes and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like, it sounds weird to say that a slasher film is sweet, but it's a really sweet slasher film.
Yeah.
So that is one of my absolute go-tos. Have you seen it?
The way that the ending scene that you referenced is so bizarre to me, because it feels like you're meant to feel like you're on a piece of film, but it's so multi-dimensional and like it
Yeah,
fucks with time and everything. And they did such a good job of like making that cinematically interesting.
yeah, it's
Yeah, it
so
was a good
good.
movie. Yeah, I own it, and I'll go back to it every now and then for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't watched it in a long time, but I can't not mention Sleepaway Camp. It's problematic. There's a lot of problematic stuff in it, but it's sort of like, I hate that people excuse things by saying it's of its time. It is of its time, um, and it does have some. It's interesting to watch as a curio, I think, and it has its
Mm.
fans, and it did spawn like a weird little mini franchise. Uh, so that's an interesting one. I actually haven't gone back to it. I watched it when I was a teenager. It was really difficult to get hold of for a really long time, and I managed to get
Mm.
like a US VHS when I was a teenager and watched it that way. And it's a bizarre film, but it's definitely sort of canon, I guess, for slasher camp horror. Um, I'm trying to think, like, other things that I love aren't so like camp set stuff, that, things like Adam's Family Values, that has a summer camp in it that is hilarious and is kind of quite horror movie things that go on there. Um, and yeah, not Hatchet. I don't think Hatchet's in a summer camp. It's just in the woods. In terms of books, didn't Riley Sager do? Isn't The Last Time I Lied? That's a summer camp kind of story, but it's like dual timeline. So it's like
Oh yeah, I'm not sure.
what happened 20 years ago and what's happening now that someone goes back to the camp. And that's quite a cool one. I think it's like his least well-known book. I think he's written other books that have gone bigger.
Mm.
But I really enjoyed it, and it's got some really cool stuff in it. Um, one of the books that I would have read as a teenager is a book called Camp Fear, which was a point in the UK. It was a point horror. I think in the US it would have just been point. But yeah, it's like a teen summer camp book. It's quite tame. Like it's one of those R.L. Stein alike books where
Okay.
scary things happen, but it's actually relatively safe in the end. Really,
Yeah.
like no one actually dies. There's a few snakes, and that's it, kind of thing. Um, but I would love. I think there has been a boom in summer camp stuff this year. I've seen a lot of summer camp books coming out. There was one called "You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight," which I really enjoyed, and it's set at a summer camp that is actually sort of like a escape room experience, sort of summer camp
Oh,
where
cool.
you can go along and pretend that you're in this famous slasher film, but it's actually then it kind of starts to happen for real, obviously.
You're right.
Um, yeah, there's quite a few out there, but I've not read tons of them.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it seems like it's kind of a thing that's happening right now, which is fun.
Yeah, camp is well, and then conversion camp specifically because it came up
Mm.
earlier. Camp Damascus,
Yes, of
Chuck,
course, of
Chuck Tingle
course.
book, and then I think Gretchen Felker Martin had that.
Cuckoo.
I think Cuckoo, yeah, which is
Yeah,
also a conversion camp horror thing. So
yeah.
yeah, camp's coming back around for sure.
Everyone wants to go to camp.
Everyone wants to. It's such a classic setting and such a classic, and that's I think that's one of the things that's attractive about the idea of approaching a trope, like telling my
Mm.
story through a thing that's been done before. For as a reader, I'm thinking this could be attractive is um, having the setting of something that's lived in, and like you already know kind of some of the beats of what is going to happen, but like making it your own interpretation of that thing. Um, from a reading perspective, I like that a lot. I like um, hearing Grady Hendrix is coming out with a book about witches, because, you know, then I can be like, all right, I kind of have my witch knowledge, so let's see how what's his take on this kind of thing. So, yeah, I like it but I feel like probably culturally, going back to your pop culture thing, probably culturally, there's something that's going on that fits this type of story, right? Even if we don't maybe consciously are not aware of it, maybe there's something to just like the things that are happening, kind of lead us to that type of storytelling or something like that. I don't know.
But in terms of like the judgment or the sort of
like the things that people are going through, if we want to tell a story like that, are suited for this type of story, maybe.
Yeah. I do think I get this feeling, and it's just a feeling, it's not confirmed, but I get this feeling that readers like they kind of what they want to know what to expect in some ways. I think that if a film or a book is just a little bit too indefinable, it's easy to just sort of move on to something else. But I think that if you say things like summer camp slasher and queer vampires, or like Chuck Tingle's book Bury Your Gays, like gay Hollywood.
Yep.
If you have those very easy sort of rungs on a ladder, it gives the reader something to climb very quickly, I think, if that's a very, very labored metaphor. But I do think that why make it difficult for a reader to engage with your story? I think it works to just make it obvious what you're doing.
Right. And I'm one of those people who, as a reader, I do like to be challenged. Like I am the one who will put in the work if the story pays off. An example that comes to mind is, have you read the book Perfume?
No, it's been on
Patrick
my list forever, but
that is a challenging book because it is almost this person's world. There's not a lot of dialogue. There's not a lot of character interaction. It's basically like this one guy. So it's a lot of exposition and just bricks of text. Like some pages, there aren't even paragraph breaks. So it's really dense. But the story's amazing. And so like if the story does the trick, I don't mind doing the work, but I know a lot of people are like, that's too much for me and they have to tap out. So yeah, I think that there are the rare people who are like, challenge me, I will get through it. And then there's other people who are like, give me a hand, I'm trying to get through this story. So
yeah.
The thing that I was fascinated to, but I don't know how much conversation we would get out of this. It depends on you, I guess, is the film journalism kind of aspect of your life. So I guess the first thing that comes to mind is, does the stuff that you do in that profession influence the writing, or just what kind of awesome shit? Because like on your website, it's things that you've gotten to do, like some of the kind of fun, cool moments in your life, are listed. So is there any kind of spillover from one to the other? And also like what kind of cool stories, if any, can you think of from like your experiences?
Okay. I mean, one cool thing that happened was that I have touched Sean Bean's decapitated head from Game of Thrones. Because I went on location, or I went on set for Game of Thrones in season 3, and we got taken around the prop warehouse.
Wow.
So we got shown the baby dragons, the models for the baby dragons before they were revealed. And we also got to poke Sean Bean's decapitated head on a stick. So that was cool.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that I kind of got into film journalism right at the tail end of it being like a genuinely cool thing to do. I got sent to like Comic-Con a bunch of times, Sundance, various different movie sets. And that was like just living the dream, just like such an amazing, amazing time to be a film journalist. But I think that even just before COVID, budgets were getting restricted, fewer sort of visits and fun things like that were really being done. And then post-COVID, it seems like a lot of stuff is just happening on Zoom and on chat, internet chats and stuff. So I think I was very, very fortunate to be working as a freelance film journalist at that time, because I got to do some great stuff. But that feels like kind of in the distance now. Like now I work 3 days a week at a magazine called Radio Times. And my job there is essentially commissioning other people to do stuff. So I don't watch anywhere near as many films as I used to. I don't really go to film screenings anymore. I definitely haven't done an interview for a couple of years. I think my last interview was Emily Mortimer. She did a fantastic horror film called Relic, which is, I gave it 5 stars. I think it's an absolutely brilliant film. But yeah, I'm not really doing it as much as I used to. I feel like I'm definitely more and more entering the murky waters of the book world than film journalism. But it definitely completely inspires everything I do. Completely. I think of I don't differentiate storytelling between books and movies. I see them as the same thing. You're still building a story. I think it's possible to tell a cinematic story with words. You don't need to watch it on a screen. So that's a huge part of it. I always say I would never have become an author unless I had been a journalist, because I think that as a journalist, you're trained to use as few words as possible and use the right words. You're being paid by the word, so every single word on that page has got to sell itself because you're being paid for that word. And I think that I definitely try to apply that to my book writing. I'm like a ruthless editor. I'll take out so many dead words. And yeah, like I think because my books are so far have all been like mixed media as well. So it's been a fun exercise to draw on my journalistic skills, and sort of give them sort of a bit of a home in the book world as well. So doing things like interviews and transcripts and articles and VHS copy text and like soundtrack listings and things like that I find really fun to do, but are more of a journalistic thing maybe than a book thing, I guess. So yeah, I think they inform each other constantly.
That's awesome.
I couldn't have done either without the other, I don't think.
Well, and I noticed in Burn the Negative. Let's see if I can get this without unplugging my headphones. I should have just had my stuff set up so it was easy to get to instead of moving around or whatever. But yeah, there's definitely like and now I'm not going to flip right, like in the past I'd flip right to stuff. But isn't there like there's like little like photocopy of a page of a book and stuff like that. So I'm the type of person who just loves like when people explore the boundaries of the format and layout of something. If it serves the story, obviously Paul Tremblay comes to mind because he can't not do that stuff. So I hadn't thought about your other experience informing like what those possibilities are, but that's really cool.
Yeah, I think actually Paul Tremblay is the reason that I even started to do that, because I'd read A Head Full of Ghosts. So I loved the way that I thought his are they like website essays? It's been a long time since I read it. Or are they?
It's like a blog or something, right?
It's a blog. Yeah, it's a blog.
Yeah.
And the voice for that was phenomenal. I completely believed that he had taken the blog of a young woman and stitched it into his story. So that, in my notes when I was planning the Shadow Glass, I basically put fun interstitials a la Paul Tremblay in Head Full of Ghosts. So it's all, I owe it all awesome to Paul.
That's awesome though. Like, I think that there was a time where early in the 2000s, House of Leaves came out, and then everybody was just like, I want to ape this kind of avant-garde shit. And So there was probably some growing pains of like why to do it.
Yeah.
But I think now when you see stuff like that, that is just a little unconventional, pretty regularly it actually serves as a story and creates the right environment as opposed to just like, I want to be different. So I feel
Yeah.
like there was probably a length of time where books were weird for the sake of being interesting to talk about, but now it's actually like when people do that stuff, it really does make the experience better. So I think that's
Yeah.
great.
Well, I think it has to have a reason to be there.
Yeah.
I think it has to inform the story. And I found with the Shadow Glass, it was like a really quick, easy way to fill in a ton of world building and backstory that you don't necessarily want readers to slog through within the narrative itself. You know, just tell them
Mhm.
up front, here's a film review of the Shadow Glass. This is the film. Now let's just start telling the story.
Yeah.
Um, and also it hopefully helps you to feel like you've seen that film, you know everything about that film, and by the end of the book, that film kind of does exist in your head because
Hmm.
you've basically consumed all the media that you would usually consume surrounding a film.
Yep.
So hopefully,
That's really cool.
it's kind of like my insidious way of trying to create fans.
That's awesome. We we talked a lot about horror, and I think I've done this a lot recently, and this has happened to me. So I didn't consider myself a horror podcaster, but I just kind of kept growing more and more of a horror kind of thing until I am of that world, even though I don't identify that way. So the thing I did was to immediately put you in as a horror author, and like I feel like because it's a camp slasher and stuff like that, that makes sense. But do you consider yourself a horror author, or are we just writing some horror sometimes? I guess is the question.
That's a really good question. I I think I would say I'm a horror fantasy author or a
Okay.
fantasy horror author. I think that there's always going to be horror in everything that I do because that's just the nature of the beast. But I think that there's like a Venn diagram where sometimes there's more horror in that circle. Is that the Venn? I don't know. Sometimes there's more horror in it. Sometimes there's more fantasy in it.
Uh-huh.
And we'll see what happens.
Awesome. Well, uh, yeah. For some reason, and I know it doesn't matter because labels. Who doesn't want to be a horror author right now? Like, who's going to be like, "How dare you call me a horror author?" But it occurred to me that, like, um, I don't want to assume people into a label if it's not correct.
Yeah.
But all that being said, I want to say that I really enjoyed Heads Will Roll. I think it's got it's got the creepy stuff. It's got the, like I said, some pretty freaky stuff. But it's got a lot of heart to it. It definitely does a good job with getting you to care about these people and see their relationships evolve. And I feel like because of the content of it, it's easy for us to feel that time we felt that way, so we can definitely like empathize with someone who's going through. I i said something in a way that was insensitive, and now my life is fucked up because of it. Like, we all have had that situation where we just stepped on we shot ourselves in the foot or whatever. And
Mhm.
so I feel like it accomplishes a lot of different things while being an entertaining story that feels authentically American.
Yes.
So
That's all I
um,
need.
I wanted to throw that in at the end there.
Yeah.
So I obviously I want to thank you for joining me and talking about this. But the thing that I'm realizing is I'm just so thankful for the fact that we have such interesting and entertaining stuff to read. So thanks for putting in all the time that it took to make this book possible. So thanks for joining me, but also thanks for such an entertaining read.
Thank you so much. And I love your podcast. So keep doing it because I'm listening.